Just name some good vampire movies. No problem. Give me some good zombie movies. There you go. You know any good werewolf films? What about... No. The Howling was pretty good. And The Company of Wolves. American Werewolf in London too. And Dog Soldier.
I rest my case.
In this episode, I'm going to try and find an explanation why lycanthropes, or werewolves, one of the most recognizable fantastic creatures in Western culture, aside from the hipster, do so poorly on the silver screen. Why are werewolf movies underrated? Lycanthropes have been more legendary and a more widespread belief than, say, the popular vampires or zombies. So why is it that they never get top billing? Why is it that they are quickly associated with movies that are trashy exploitation or just plain bad? I believe there are several reasons for this, and they may all have contributed to this phenomenon in some way or another. So let's take a look. What makes a good horror genre?
You did this!
Oh my god! No, it's not screaming models holding shaky cameras. One of the most important aspects to make something popular is legacy. Most horror genres have a couple of works, be it movies, books, or some other form of media, that form a solid basis for the genre. This is mostly an iconic and recognizable story that sets up a list of rules, which forms the fundaments of the genre. They can either be loyally followed or rebelliously broken, or the writer has no clue. So what iconic story is the basis for the werewolf genre? Well, to understand where the list of rules was created and how the idea of a modern werewolf came to be, we have to take a look at the roots of cinema. In the silent movie era, we can already find a great number of monster movies. A couple of them were really racist, and some others were about werewolves, but they were mostly quite simplistic and only loosely based on folklore stories. There wasn't really a complex narrative, let alone a collection of horror tropes to follow. It was mostly just this. The first wave of full-length horror features was in the 30s, when Universal released numerous monster movies. And I mean numerous. If you think all those sequels, remakes and crossovers are only a problem of today, think again.
Hollywood sucks.
Most of these were based or inspired by famous Gothic novels. There was of course Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Bram Stoker's Dracula, H.G. Wells's The Invisible Man, and so on. Here we may find a first answer to our question. There was no famous novel about a werewolf. Arguably, Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde did get some inspiration from the idea of lycanthropy, but it wasn't really about werewolves. It falls more under the category of mad scientist.
Inside you forever. No, Satan himself by my side. No, and I know that
In 1933, Hollywood screenwriter Guy Andor, no, he's not an Ewok, published the book Werewolf in Paris. It enjoyed mild success, so of course an adaptation for the silver screen wasn't far behind. Universal Studios, which still dominated the horror scene at the time, released The Werewolf of London in 1935, changing Paris to London to make it appeal to the English-speaking audience.
Remember this, Dr. Glendon. The werewolf instinctively seeks to kill the thing it loves best.
The movie was a great success also, and can be considered the first full-length feature with a narrative about a werewolf as a horror monster. But somehow it didn't quite manage to make its mark in horror history. This may have to do with the fact that the censors looked down upon the idea of lycanthropy, and its parallels to the relatively fresh Darwin theory of evolution, which still was a subject of controversy. Who am I kidding? It still is. Fucking idiots. In 1941, screenwriter Kurt Siodmak came up with a fresh and original story about a werewolf simply titled The Wolfman. This was the film that changed everything. Okay, maybe not everything, but it did mean a great deal to the werewolf genre. By creating the modern idea of the lycanthrope we know today, it introduced many tropes that didn't really exist before. Most notably the vulnerability of silver, the fact that they only changed at the full moon, that the victims were marked with a pentagram, and that whoever got bitten became a werewolf as well. Now just take a second and think about these rules. Do they look familiar at all? Indeed, my good sir. I believe what they did was take the tropes of the popular vampire movies, reshape them a little, and apply them to werewolves. So here we find a second indication why Wolfman get second billing. In their core, they're basically a copy of vampires. Now I don't want to shit on a timeless classic, but that's really lazy. Anyway, I won't dwell on the Wolfman any longer, as I will take a look at it in the next episode. But I will say that if you compare it to Dracula, Night of the Living Dead, Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and other genre-defining horror films, it kind of figures why werewolves aren't as respected. At least that's what I think. Look, I know the Wolfman is a classic, and a lot of people love it, so just remember, this is just my opinion, okay? Just don't overreact or anything. Okay, this video is turning out to be a little longer than I expected, so I'm going to leave it right here. You will find the rest of this editorial in part 2, which I will upload ASAP. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to comment, like, or subscribe. Any support is most welcome and much appreciated, so yeah, click this little werewolf right here to go to part 2. The link will actually work when I actually have part 2 uploaded.